Two attacks in the heart of Burkina Faso's capital. It happened despite a regional military offensive that's meant to prevent such attacks. So is that campaign working, or is further intervention needed? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. Fighters have once again targeted Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou. They launched two coordinated attacks on Friday against the army's headquarters and the French embassy, killing several people and injuring dozens more. The government has called it a terrorist attack. Burkina Faso is one of 5 regional countries contributing to a military force called the Sahel G-5 along with France. It's meant to go after armed groups, including Qaeda and ISIL, but the attacks against civilians continue. We'll get to our guests in a moment, but first, this report from Nicolas Haq in Ouagadougou.
Downtown Ouagadougou on Friday, another attack at the heart of Burkina Faso's capital. Coordinated and well-planned, the targets the army headquarters, the French embassy, and its cultural center. Witnesses say some of the attackers came by taxi, others in a pickup. They started shooting, set fire to the truck, and continued to fire.
There was so much gunfire, damage everywhere. 2 policemen went nearby the army headquarters. There was a car with around 4 to 6 people. They opened fire. There was an explosion. We saw a lot of shots fired and a lot of smoke, and then people started running.
8 soldiers were killed, several others wounded and sent to hospital. After an hour-long gun battle, 8 attackers were killed by the armed forces. The army continued to comb the area looking for more attackers that may be on the loose. Fighter groups in the Sahel repeatedly target Burkina Faso. The country's capital is home to a base for the French special forces deployed in the Sahel to fight rebel groups. Clashes and frequent attacks have led to tens of thousands of people fleeing the area. Fighters regularly attack police outposts in the north of the country. Last year, an Al-Qaeda-affiliated group attacked a Turkish restaurant in Ouagadougou, killing 19 people. In 2016, 30 people died in another attack on a hotel and a restaurant in the city. But this is the most brazen attack so far. These 3 locations are some of the most safest and secured in this country. Many people here say if they're able to attack these places, then no one is safe. With the death toll likely to rise, Burkina Faso is again in mourning, fearing what could come next. Nicolas Haq, Al Jazeera, Ouagadougou.
As we mentioned earlier, Burkina Faso is one of a handful of countries in the Sahel region that are battling armed groups. The Sahel G5 force also includes Mauritania, Mali, Niger and Chad. In February last year, they agreed to set up a 5,000-strong force to counter threats that have caused thousands of deaths. The joint force has its headquarters in central Mali and is backed by France, the US and the EU. Let's now get the thoughts of our guests. In Paris, Marie-Roger Biloa, she is the editor of Africa International. Joining us on Skype from Dakar, Adama Gaye, former Director of Information at ECOWAS, that's the Economic Community of West African States. And in Johannesburg, Martin Ewi is Senior Researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. Welcome to you all. Let me start by asking Ms. Marie this. We're talking about attacks targeting the French embassy and the army's headquarters. Is this likely to raise questions about how did the attackers manage to get into highly secured areas?
You know, it's very difficult. I don't think any country, any government in the world can prevent totally terrorist attacks to happen. But of course, and what you can do is you can do your best actually. But the most important thing is the context. Why? And you see places where there are no attacks, no terrorist attacks, because there's no breeding ground for that. I think this is most efficient in combating terrorism. And what we've been seeing here is that the talks, the rhetoric is mainly, barely, about military means, about security forces, but all the background is really being ignored. And what we see, there are two things here. You have the real breeding ground, which is Mali, and there is a spillover effect. And the second thing is that now people start suspecting the former president, Blaise Compaoré, who's now in exile in Côte d'Ivoire. He's been ousted because he wanted a third term. So, and under his regime, there were no security problems because he has his own system with all the terrorists around him in Mali and Niger and all these jihadists when they were really threatening Mali and all the other countries. He had deals with them. He managed to make Burkina Faso sort of a safe haven. And it was very frequent to see famous terrorist leaders in Ouagadougou, you know, being hosted in villas and beautiful houses.
So you're suggesting
by the former president.
The former Burkinabe president, Blaise Compaoré, is to blame for this. Let me share the thoughts of Mr. Gaye in Dakar. I mean, we're talking about, this is not the first attack to target Burkina Faso. So are we talking about security breach? Are we talking about accomplices within the military establishment who paved the way for the attackers to strike at the very heart of the military base?
First of all, I have personally to debunk the allegations somehow linking former President Compaoré to what has happened yesterday in Burkina Faso. I do believe that although he may have an interest to see that the government that has succeeded him after having been for long part of his own regime, the current president used to be very close to him, that these people are not able to manage the security and economic and democratic conditions of the country. He could be pleased with that, but to jump and start believing that he may be behind that situation, I don't think it's something that I would accept. I do believe, however, that what has happened yesterday, is yet another example of a lack of leadership in that country. Those people who came to power in the wake of the October 2014 uprising of the Burkina Faso people, ousting thereby the former President Blaise Compaoré, the new people who came to power, like Roch-Marc Kaboré and his likes, they have not shown capacity to lead. They have followed somehow the track of talks of security issue that has become sexy, not really addressing them very properly. And I believe that this is, first of all, a lack of leadership, and this has shown in the places where this attack happened. The headquarters of the army, for all place, that's where the people dared to attack. That's so that they can attack everywhere.
Okay.
It indicates that they didn't take properly measures to avoid such kind of attack.
Mr. Iwi, I mean, against the backdrop of this recent attack, isn't this something which is likely to raise the debate about the need to focus on countries which have huge political problems like Burkina Faso, instead of putting the emphasis on the military option to tackle groups like Qaeda and ISIL?
Well, I think the recent attack in Burkina Faso reveals a lot of things, both political, social, and economic situation of the country. We can always blame leaders, when such attacks occur. But we know that even the most powerful countries have also been targeted, in some of their most vulnerable areas. So what I think this attack really reveals is that it shows the endemic nature of, these groups, how entrenched they are in Burkina Faso. Because to plan such an attack, you have to know the area, you have to know the region, you have to know the country, the site, and so on and so forth. And the commando manner with which they carry out this attack, I think is indicative of the knowledge that they have about this site and the entrenchment of these cells in Burkina Faso. I don't think that any president, if you were to talk of Blaise Compaoré, will have been able to prevent what is happening. Now, the dynamics in Burkina Faso during the period of President Blaise Compaoré was that terrorists were using Burkina Faso as a logistic site, as a logistic base, where they were, reuniting and planning and carrying out attacks in other parts of the region, in the Sahel, mainly Mali. And therefore, when the new system came and supported France, contributed troops to the French deployment, the UN deployment in Mali, these groups, had to now change their objectives in Burkina Faso, which is no longer to serve, to just use the country as a base, logistic base, but also it's a target.
Ms. Marie, where does this military attack leave the G5 force? Are they likely to step in and play a role, or do you think that they were born inefficient, unable to cope with the growing influence of groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, ISIL, and the different groups operating in the area?
If you mean that the Sahel G5 is in a position to stop terrorist attack, then the answer is no. And I was in Mali last week. There were a conference there on security in Sahel. And it was very interesting to listen to the people there, where the fact that France actually is in the forefront of the battle and is not having its own agenda, because France is not there for, let's say, to solve Malian problems. France is there because they believe the security issue is a threat to Europe and to France, and that if Sahel keeps on becoming a dangerous zone where jihadists can regroup and spread over, it would be dangerous for them. And so you can see President Macron coming to Mali without even stopping over in the capital Bamako, going to Gaye straight to see the French military and take care of them and say, well, my problem, my concern is the French troops and security in France. So Malians feel disenfranchised, and you can never reach any solution with only this the Sahel G5. Every military option, all these troops will be useless. We know terrorism is an asymmetric war. We've been saying that. So
therefore, this explains the challenges everyone faces.
You cannot fight it with... Yes, and we also know that at the basis of all this, there are economic problems, social problems. People are poor. I was really impressed by a young girl saying that we need to eat, we have hunger.
Okay.
Sorry.
Mr. Gaye, I mean, as Marie was saying, this started with the idea of addressing the root causes of the problems that the Sahel region faces, which are also climate change, drought, the different ethnic makeups, instability, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and so on and so forth. But suddenly the G5 is more about a military option to tackle the military groups. Which one should be the top priority? Is it the root causes of the problem or a military option against these groups?
I think a military option is just something that you use, in my mind, as a leverage to open up dialogue. We know the policy since Monroe of the carrot and the stick. You need, for diplomacy to work, to have really a stick in order to bring all the force people around the table. That's one side of the aspect. But unfortunately, even that aspect, this G5 doesn't have enough willpower to address that. Indeed, the breeding ground, in my mind, is not just Mali, it's also economic and social problems. Poverty, lack of democratic dispensation, and also, of course, inequity. There is a tiny minority of people at the head of the states that are very wealthy, where the vast majority is poor. So if you want to address these problems, I think you need to look at what happened also elsewhere, beyond the Sahel and beyond Africa. For instance, there are many parts of the world where you have had this kind of rebellion, and they have been addressed through dialogue somehow. Take in Peru with the Senderosos Luminos, take the FARC recently in Colombia, take in Indonesia during the heart of the Cold War, or you can also take other parts of the world, even in Ireland, where the current president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, mediated the peace between the North, the people that
So
were
you think
waging
a military
conflict in that part. So you need people to talk, to address the issues in order also to have the military might functioning.
I get your point. Mr. Iwi, I mean, the G5 force was established last year. However, it doesn't have the finances to start its operation. There's a problem when it comes to the chain of command, the structure of the force. It seems to be now focusing more on the border operation instead of coordinating its whole mandate. Do you think that this force needs to be reinvented for it to be able to carry out the tasks it faces?
I am generally skeptical of any peacekeeping approach to solve problems of terrorism. So far, there is no shining example to point to. The African Union has deployed several thousands of troops in Somalia, which is a much smaller country, yet they've not been able to defeat Al-Shabaab. We also know that even in Mali, the UN has deployed several thousands of troops, yet they are unable to control the militants. So I don't see where the G5 can really fit in. And the mandate that I saw with the troops level, 5,000, I think really, I don't think that this is really a force that can make any serious change. If you also look, my problem with the approach to peacekeeping is not that I don't think it will not work. I think that the peacekeepers today are not trained to carry out the tasks that exist on the ground. I also think that the situation that they face is completely different from the mandate that they have. I also think that the resources that are needed to fund peacekeeping or peacekeepers on the ground are not also there. And therefore, for us to rush to deploy a peacekeeping mission, which is not well equipped, which is not well adapted to the situation on the ground, which has no resources, and which is also very limited, I think it's really a suicide mission. Okay. And I'm really, really advising against this peacekeeping deployment in context of terrorism without appropriate training.
Ms. Marie, if you look at the map of the region, you have the Americans with large drone facilities in Djibouti and Niger, the French with their advanced air power based in Mali and different parts of the area. And then you have the 5 regional countries of the Sahel. Yet, there seems to be something which is wrong. You don't feel like the coordination is at its top between all these different groups to try to tackle groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb or ISIL?
Yeah. First of all, the G5, the Sahel G5 is an initiative of France. And that is the first sin. And that's why it doesn't work so far. Because the members don't have the same kind of approach and the same type of problems. What is happening in the north of Mali, which has been now divided into, and you have, it's not a problem we have in Niger, for instance. Mali has been divided into two parts, and the north is being controlled by the MNLA and the Tuareg, supported by France. Because what happened is that when President Hollande came in January 2013 to rescue Mali being invaded by jihadists, and they stopped them. Everybody was very happy. But in the aftermath of that, they decided to organize a strong security in Mali first. They never did that. They did a fundraising which broke like 1 billion and something. Nobody knows where that money went through.
So you're talking about a series of failures to try to...
much of it.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Gaye, I mean, if you look at this situation, a United Nations panel of experts that was established to tackle to implement the 2015 peace agreement in Mali blames the government and all the parties for delaying the implementation of the deal. So we're talking about political problems that, as Marie mentioned, that need to be solved first of all before you move forward to tackle issues like ISIL and Al-Qaeda.
Absolutely. But first of all, before you blame the African leadership, you should blame those experts of the United Nations. They are useless. They are just living out of terrorism, tourism, traveling across Africa these days and talking about terrorism and peacekeeping and operations, justifying their ways of having this high-style lifestyle. So that's the big problem that we need to address first. I've not heard in the conversation, for instance, the names of ECOWAS, for instance, which is, for God's sake, the regional body that should be addressing those issues. We have not heard the African Union here in the discussion. And beyond all, Mrs. Mary mentioned earlier the dubious role of France in the north of Mali, for instance, that has allowed all these things to continue. The reality is that she has not told is that France is trying to have a control over the Ahelbarra region, the northern part of Mali, where it seems there are huge deposits of hydrocarbon and other natural resources. So those problems need to be addressed. We need to have frank discussion. We need to put money on the table by African people to show that this is a serious issue. I believe in the wake of this attack, for instance, there should be at least an ECOWAS summit, not another talking shop, but a place where they decide to commit money to addressing these things, and also bringing to the table the people that are making these things, because at the end of the day, it's
about the different factions that have
democracy. It's a lack of money that
I see your point.
Situation. You need to address it
Let me go.
And not to subcontract it to the UN.
Let me go to Mr. Iwi. Mr. Iwi, you've listened to what Ms. Marie and Mr. Gaye was saying. Basically, if the need for the Africans to step in, particularly the African Union, it has a Peace and Security Council which should referee such problems. Why the Africans don't show strong will to help solve this problem?
Well, I think it's how you measure the level or extent of that will. I wouldn't use such a strong word that there is no political will. I think the political will is there, but it's what comes with that political will, the kind of commitment, the support. If you are looking at it from the financial perspective, you will see that then there are some who will even say there's no political will. But if you look at what the African Union has done, for example, you know, they have tried to bring the countries together to really strengthen the intelligence sharing, which I think was a good thing, to recognize the fact that to combat or defeat terrorism, you need to start with intelligence and you end with intelligence. And in my view, I think the G5 troops should all be intelligence agents. You know, we don't need troops on the ground. We need people who can share intelligence. If we had good intelligence, I think this attack would have been detected and it would have been intercepted. But because of the absence of robust intelligence, that's why we always have attacks of this nature.
It seems this is going to be a long way to go before this issue of the groups operating in the Sahel region is going to be dealt with. Mr. Martin Iwi, Ms. Mary Roger Biloa, and Mr. Adama Gaye, thank you very much indeed for contribution to the program. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashem Ahelbarra, and the whole team here, bye for now.